The sun was just beginning to rise over Oak Ridge Estates, casting a golden glow over the perfectly manicured lawns and cookie-cutter McMansions that lined the streets. The neighborhood was the epitome of suburban perfection. Pristine sidewalks, freshly painted mailboxes, and not a single blade of grass out of place. But there was one property that stood out like a sore thumb, a relic of a bygone era that refused to conform to the HOA's strict aesthetic standards. Mia's 2-acre plot was a slice of rural paradise in the heart of suburbia. Her modest farmhouse, with its weathered wooden siding and wraparound porch, was surrounded by lush gardens, a small orchard, and a fenced-in pasture where her 2 cows, Bessie and Daisy, grazed contentedly. Chickens clucked and scratched at the earth, and a few goats lounged in the shade of an old oak tree. It was a peaceful, idyllic scene, one that Mia had worked hard to create and maintain. But not everyone in Oak Ridge Estates appreciated Mia's little slice of heaven. Karen Whitmore, the vice president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, was one of those people. She had moved to the neighborhood 5 years ago, drawn by its reputation for order and uniformity. Karen was the kind of person who took pride in her perfectly curated life, her immaculate home, her designer wardrobe, her spotless SUV. She had a binder for everything from her monthly budget to her grocery lists, and she approached her role in the HOA with the same level of meticulousness. Karen had never liked Mia's property. It was an eyesore, she thought, a blight on the otherwise pristine neighborhood. The cows, the chickens, the goats, they didn't belong in a place like Oak Ridge Estates. They were messy, noisy, and, in Karen's opinion, a threat to the property values that she and her neighbors had worked so hard to maintain. So, on that fateful morning, Karen decided to do something about it. She pulled up to Mia's property in her gleaming white Lexus, her HOA binder tucked neatly under her arm. She had spent the previous evening drafting a formal complaint, complete with photos of Mia's unsightly livestock and a list of HOA violations. Karen was confident that she could convince Mia to get rid of her animals, or at least force her to comply with the HOA's strict rules. Mia was in the garden, tending to her herbs, when she heard the sound of car tires crunching on gravel. She looked up to see Karen striding purposefully toward her, her high heels sinking into the soft earth with each step. Mia sighed. She had dealt with Karen before, and she knew that this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "Good morning, Karen," Mia said, forcing a smile. "What brings you by so early?" Karen didn't return the smile. "Mia, we need to talk about your livestock," she said, her tone clipped and businesslike. She opened her binder and pulled out a stack of papers. "I've received several complaints from your neighbors about the noise and the smell, not to mention the fact that your cows are lowering property values." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Lowering property values? Really? I think Bessie and Daisy add a certain charm to the neighborhood." Karen's lips tightened into a thin line. "This isn't a joke, Mia. Oak Ridge Estates is a residential community, not a farm. Your animals are a nuisance, and they need to go." Mia crossed her arms over her chest. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Karen, but I'm not getting rid of my animals. They're part of my life, and they're not hurting anyone." Karen's eyes narrowed. "They're hurting the neighborhood, Mia, and if you refuse to comply with the HOA's rules, we'll have no choice but to take action." Mia took a deep breath, trying to keep her temper in check. "Karen, I've lived here for 10 years. My family has owned this land for generations. We were here long before the HOA even existed. I'm not going to let you or anyone else tell me what I can and can't do on my own property." Karen's face flushed with anger. "You're being unreasonable, Mia. This isn't just about you. It's about the entire community. We have standards to uphold." Mia shook her head. "Standards that don't include a little diversity, apparently. Look, Karen, I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want to live my life the way I see fit. If my cows bother you that much, maybe you should just look the other way." Karen's jaw tightened. "This isn't over, Mia. Mark my words, you'll regret this." With that, Karen turned on her heel and marched back to her car, her binder clutched tightly to her chest. Mia watched her go, a mixture of frustration and determination bubbling up inside her. She knew that Karen wasn't going to let this go, but she wasn't going to back down either. As Karen's Lexus disappeared down the road, Mia turned her attention back to her garden. She knelt down in the dirt, her hands sinking into the rich soil as she carefully tended to her herbs. The scent of lavender and rosemary filled the air, calming her nerves and grounding her in the present moment. But even as she worked, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Karen wasn't the type to give up easily, and Mia knew that she would have to fight tooth and nail to protect her way of life. As if on cue, Bessie let out a low, contented moo from the pasture. Mia smiled, a sense of resolve settling over her. No matter what Karen or the HOA threw at her, she wasn't going to let them take away the things that mattered most to her. Not without a fight. The morning after Karen's confrontation, Mia woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. She groaned, reaching for it with one hand while the other rubbed the sleep from her eyes. The screen lit up with a series of notifications, emails, texts, and missed calls. Her heart sank as she saw the subject line of the first email: Notice of HOA violation and fines. Mia sat up in bed, her pulse quickening as she opened the email. It was from the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, and it was as formal and cold as Karen herself. The email detailed a list of violations: unauthorized livestock on property, unsanitary conditions, noise disturbances, and failure to maintain community aesthetic standards. The fines were steep, $500 per month until the violations were resolved. Mia's hands trembled as she read the email. She knew Karen was serious, but she hadn't expected the HOA to move so quickly. She scrolled through the attached documents, her frustration mounting with each line. The HOA was demanding that she remove her cows, chickens, and goats within 30 days or face escalating fines and potential legal action. This is ridiculous, Mia muttered to herself, tossing her phone onto the bed. She got up and pulled on a pair of jeans and a flannel shirt, her mind racing. She needed to figure out a way to fight this, but she wasn't sure where to start. As she stepped outside, the crisp morning air hit her face, and she took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. Bessie and Daisy were grazing peacefully in the pasture, their tails swishing lazily. The chickens clucked and pecked at the ground, and the goats bleated a greeting as they trotted over to the fence. Mia smiled despite herself. These animals were her family, and she wasn't going to let Karen or the HOA take them away. But she needed a plan. Later that afternoon, Mia's best friend and former college roommate, Sarah, arrived at the farm. Sarah was a lawyer who had recently moved back to the area after a stint in New York City. She was the kind of person who thrived on challenges, and Mia knew that if anyone could help her navigate the HOA's labyrinth of rules, it was Sarah. Sarah pulled up in her beat-up Jeep, her curly hair tied back in a messy bun and a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She hopped out of the car and gave Mia a quick hug. "All right, let's see what we're dealing with," she said, her tone all business. Mia led her inside, where they spread out the HOA documents on the kitchen table. Sarah skimmed through the fine print, her brow furrowing as she read. "Okay, so they're citing Article 12 of the HOA bylaws, which prohibits non-residential use of property," she said. "But here's the thing. Oak Ridge Estates was built on land that was originally zoned for agricultural use. There might be a grandfather clause that allows you to keep your animals." Mia's eyes lit up. "A grandfather clause? What does that mean?" Sarah grinned. "It means that if your property was used for agriculture before the HOA was established, you might be exempt from their rules. We just need to find the original zoning documents to prove it." Mia felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since receiving the HOA's email. "Do you think we can find them?" Sarah nodded. "I'll start digging. In the meantime, you should keep documenting everything: photos of your property, records of your animal's care, anything that shows you're not causing a nuisance. And don't engage with Karen or the HOA until we have a solid case." Over the next few days, Sarah worked tirelessly to uncover the zoning history of Mia's property. She spent hours at the local courthouse, sifting through old records and talking to county officials. Meanwhile, Mia focused on her farm, trying to ignore the growing tension in the neighborhood. Karen, however, wasn't content to wait. She launched a full-scale campaign against Mia, rallying her neighbors to sign a petition to ban all livestock from Oak Ridge Estates. She even organized a special HOA meeting to discuss the livestock crisis, as she called it. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, and Karen made sure everyone knew about it. Mia tried to stay out of the fray, but it was impossible. Every time she left her property, she felt the weight of her neighbors' stares. Some were sympathetic, but many had bought into Karen's narrative that Mia's animals were a threat to their way of life. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable, and Mia knew that the upcoming meeting would be a turning point. The night before the meeting, Sarah called Mia with exciting news. "I found it," she said, her voice tinged with triumph. "The original zoning exception from 1982. Your property is grandfathered in for agricultural use. The HOA can't force you to get rid of your animals." Mia felt a surge of relief. "That's amazing. So what do we do now?" "We go to the meeting and present the evidence," Sarah said. "But we need to be strategic. Karen's going to come at you hard, so we need to be ready." Mia nodded, even though Sarah couldn't see her. "I'll be ready." The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a sterile, modern building that felt out of place in the otherwise quaint neighborhood. The room was packed with residents, their murmurs filling the air as Mia and Sarah walked in. Karen was at the front of the room, standing behind a podium with her binder open and a smug expression on her face. The meeting began with Karen outlining the issues with Mia's property. She showed photos of Bessie and Daisy, exaggerated the noise and smell, and even claimed that the animals were a safety hazard. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement, and Mia felt her stomach churn. When it was her turn to speak, Mia stood up, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep breath and began. "I understand that some of you have concerns about my animals, but I want to assure you that they're well cared for and not a danger to anyone. My family has owned this land for generations, and we've always used it for agriculture. In fact, I have documentation proving that my property is exempt from the HOA's rules regarding livestock." She handed a copy of the zoning exception to Karen, who scanned it with a frown. The room fell silent as Karen's face turned red. This doesn't change anything," she stammered. "Your animals are still a nuisance." Sarah stood up, her voice calm but firm. "Actually, it changes everything. The HOA has no legal grounds to fine Mia or force her to remove her animals. If you continue to harass her, we'll have no choice but to take legal action." The room erupted in murmurs again, this time with a mix of shock and admiration. Karen looked flustered, her carefully constructed argument crumbling before her eyes. She tried to regain control of the meeting, but it was clear that the tide had turned. As Mia and Sarah left the community center, Mia felt a sense of victory. She had stood up to Karen and the HOA, and she had won, for now. But she knew that this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to give up easily, and Mia would need to stay vigilant if she wanted to protect her way of life. The days following the HOA meeting were a whirlwind of activity. Mia's victory had sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge Estates, and the neighborhood was more divided than ever. Karen, humiliated but undeterred, doubled down on her campaign against Mia. She took to social media, posting lengthy rants on the Oak Ridge Estates Facebook group about the decline of community standards and the unfair advantage Mia had over her neighbors. Her posts were filled with exaggerated claims and thinly veiled insults, and they quickly sparked heated debates among the residents. Mia, on the other hand, decided to take a different approach. She had always been private about her life, but she realized that if she wanted to win this battle, she needed to rally support from the broader community. With Sarah's encouragement, she created an Instagram account for her farm, aptly named Oak Ridge Acres. She posted photos of Bessie and Daisy grazing in the pasture, videos of the chickens pecking at the ground, and even a few clips of the goats playfully butting heads. She shared stories about the history of her family's land and the importance of sustainable farming. To her surprise, the account quickly gained traction. Within a week, she had thousands of followers, many of whom were local families who had grown tired of Karen's constant complaints. They left comments like, "Your farm is a breath of fresh air," and "We need more places like this in our community." Some even started showing up at her gate, asking if they could visit the animals. Mia decided to capitalize on the momentum by hosting a Cow Cuddles Sunday event. She invited families to come and meet Bessie and Daisy, offering guided tours of the farm and homemade treats from her garden. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of families showed up, their children squealing with delight as they petted the cows and fed the goats. The event was a resounding success, and Mia felt a renewed sense of hope. But Karen wasn't about to let Mia's newfound popularity go unchallenged. Karen had been quietly seething since the HOA meeting, and Mia's Instagram fame was the final straw. She called an emergency meeting of the HOA board, determined to find a way to shut Mia down once and for all. "This is getting out of hand," she said, slamming her binder on the table. "Mia is turning our neighborhood into a circus. We need to take action before it's too late." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. While some shared Karen's concerns, others were starting to question her motives. "Karen, we've already been through this," one of them said. "Mia has the legal right to keep her animals. What more can we do?" Karen's eyes gleamed with determination. "We can make her life miserable. If we can't force her to get rid of the animals, we'll make it so difficult for her that she'll want to leave." Over the next few days, Karen launched a series of underhanded tactics. She called animal control, claiming that Mia's animals were being neglected and posed a danger to the community. She filed noise complaints, even though the cows and goats were quieter than most of the neighborhood's lawnmowers. She even convinced a few of her allies to park their cars in front of Mia's driveway, blocking her access to the road. Mia tried to stay calm, but the constant harassment was wearing her down. She knew Karen was trying to provoke her, but it was hard not to feel overwhelmed. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," she admitted to Sarah one evening. "It feels like she's always one step ahead." Sarah, however, had an idea. "Karen's playing dirty, but we can fight fire with fire. Let's take this to the media." The following week, a local news crew showed up at Mia's farm. Sarah had reached out to a reporter she knew, pitching the story as a David and Goliath battle between a small farmer and an overbearing HOA. The reporter was intrigued, and within days, the story was picked up by several outlets. The segment, titled HOA versus Heifers, Who Owns Suburbia?, aired on the evening news, and it was everything Mia could have hoped for. The reporter interviewed Mia, who spoke passionately about her love for her animals and her commitment to preserving her family's legacy. They also interviewed some of the families who had attended Cow Cuddles Sunday, who praised Mia for bringing a sense of community to the neighborhood. Karen, of course, was given a chance to respond, but her on-camera interview backfired spectacularly. She came across as cold and vindictive, her carefully rehearsed lines falling flat in the face of Mia's genuine warmth. The segment ended with a shot of Bessie and Daisy grazing peacefully in the pasture, their gentle moos a stark contrast to Karen's harsh words. The story went viral. Within hours, it was shared thousands of times on social media, with hashtags like #SaveOakridgeAcres and #TeamMia trending locally. People from all over the country reached out to Mia, offering their support and sharing their own stories of HOA battles. Even celebrities chimed in, with one well-known actress tweeting, "Mia is my hero. Suburbia needs more cows and less Karens." Karen, meanwhile, became the target of ridicule. A parody TikTok account at HOA Karen Cows was created, featuring exaggerated reenactments of her most infamous moments. The account quickly gained over 100,000 followers, and Karen's attempts to have it taken down only fueled the fire. As the media frenzy died down, Mia found herself in a stronger position than ever. The HOA board, embarrassed by the negative publicity, quietly dropped their campaign against her. Karen, however, refused to back down. She became increasingly isolated, her once loyal allies distancing themselves from her. But Mia knew that Karen wasn't the type to give up easily, and she braced herself for whatever came next. For now, though, she allowed herself to enjoy the victory. She stood in the pasture, watching as Bessie and Daisy grazed contentedly in the golden light of the setting sun. The farm was alive with the sounds of clucking chickens, bleating goats, and the laughter of children visiting for another Cow Cuddles Sunday. Mia smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had fought for her way of life, and she had won, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in the power of community and the beauty of a simpler life. The final showdown between Mia and Karen came at the next HOA meeting, which had been scheduled to address the ongoing livestock issue. The community center was packed, with residents spilling out into the hallway. The atmosphere was tense, a palpable mix of curiosity, frustration, and anticipation. Karen stood at the front of the room, her binder open and her expression steely. Mia sat near the back, flanked by Sarah and a small group of supporters. Bessie and Daisy, though not physically present, felt like silent witnesses to the drama unfolding in their name. Karen opened the meeting with a rehearsed speech, her voice dripping with faux concern. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to discuss a matter that threatens the very fabric of our community. Mia's livestock, while perhaps charming to some, are a clear violation of our shared values and standards. They are lowering property values, creating unsanitary conditions, and disrupting the peace of our neighborhood. I urge the board to take immediate action to resolve this issue once and for all. The room erupted in murmurs, some of agreement but many of dissent. Mia stood up, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Karen, with all due respect, this isn't about property values or community standards. This is about control. You don't like that my farm doesn't fit your idea of what Oak Ridge Estates should be. But that doesn't give you the right to dictate how I live my life. Karen's eyes narrowed. This isn't about control, Mia. It's about fairness. Why should you get to flout the rules while the rest of us have to follow them? Sarah stood up, holding a stack of documents. Actually, Karen, Mia isn't flouting any rules. As we've already established, her property is grandfathered in for agricultural use under the 1982 zoning exception. The HOA has no legal grounds to force her to remove her animals. And if you continue to harass her, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. The room fell silent as Sarah handed the documents to the HOA board president, a retired judge named Mr. Thompson. He adjusted his glasses and scanned the papers, his expression unreadable. After a long moment, he looked up and addressed the room. It appears that Ms. Carter is correct. The zoning exception is legally binding, and the HOA has no authority to override it. This matter is closed. Karen's face turned crimson. This is unacceptable, she shouted, slamming her binder on the table. You're letting her turn this neighborhood into a barnyard. What about the rest of us? Don't our voices matter? Mr. Thompson fixed her with a stern look. Karen, this isn't a dictatorship. The rules apply to everyone, including you. If you have a problem with that, perhaps this isn't the right community for you. The room erupted in applause, and Karen looked around, her face a mask of shock and humiliation. She grabbed her binder and stormed out of the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The sound of the door slamming behind her was met with cheers and laughter. In the weeks that followed, Karen's influence in the neighborhood waned. She resigned from her position on the HOA board and put her house up for sale, citing a desire to move to a more orderly community. Her departure was met with relief by many, and Oak Ridge Estates began to heal from the divisions she had caused. Mia, meanwhile, became something of a local hero. Her farm, now a beloved community landmark, hosted regular events that brought neighbors together. Cow Cuddle Sundays became a weekly tradition, drawing families from all over the area. Mia even started a small farmer's market, selling fresh eggs, goat milk, and herbs from her garden. The farm became a symbol of resilience and community, a reminder that sometimes, standing up for what you believe in is worth the fight. One sunny afternoon, as Mia stood in the pasture watching Bessie and Daisy graze, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The farm was thriving, the animals were happy, and the neighborhood was finally starting to feel like home again. She smiled, knowing that she had fought not just for herself, but for the values she held dear. Months later, Mia received a package in the mail. Inside was a small stuffed cow and a note that read, "Thank you for standing up for what's right. You've inspired us all." The package was unsigned, but Mia knew it was from one of the many families who had supported her during the battle with Karen. As she placed the stuffed cow on her mantle, Mia felt a surge of gratitude. She had faced down one of the biggest challenges of her life, and she had come out stronger on the other side. The farm was more than just a piece of land. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, community, and the belief that sometimes the underdog can win. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and community, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Let us know in the comments what you think about Mia's victory and how you've stood up for what you believe in. And if you're ever in Oak Ridge Estates, be sure to stop by Oak Ridge Acres for a cow cuddle Sunday. You won't regret it.